up, we're going to have Janina to give us our financial report from Tuesday night. She's obviously abbreviated it somewhat so that she just tries to highlight major issues on the financial report, and then she wants to spend just a little bit of time giving you a little bit more of an overview and then talking about what we're generally seeing. We want to give you some idea. We started our budget kickoff Wednesday with the directors, and they'll be starting to turn in their budgets through the month of April, and we'll have our meetings with them into April and May. But we're already kind of getting some idea of what they may be requesting, so I want to share a little bit of that with you. So, Ms. Janine, would you take us through our financial report?
Certainly will. And again, this was the one that I was going to give on Tuesday night. It's for January 31st, month end.
She got pushed out by the mosquitoes.
Zika.
Yeah, Zika. This is a third of the way through the fiscal year, so it should be on the average about 33% of the way through some of our budgets. So let's start off with governmental funds. Real quickly, the fund balance for the general fund and the debt service funds, you can see increased significantly from your last report, on December's report, because the property taxes were due by January 31st, at least the first round of those, because as you know, TAD had some delays. Some other major changes you'll see here is a decrease in the car rental operating fund. This again is due to the budget transfer for capital projects, which is primarily being used for the reconstruction of the planning and development building. On to the proprietary funds. Texas Star Sports Complex debt reserve decreased due to the payoff of the softball world debt. And other substantial increases are in the golf course debt service fund as well as the water and wastewater debt service funds. Payments for these are typically made in February and August. But monthly transfers into these accounts, so you've built up enough principal and interest, are done during the year so that you can have that ready to pay off at those times. So that's why you see adjustments every month for those.
And Janina kind of mentioned that, but we've been working a long time to get that payoff of softball world. The
That's
softball
huge.
world is paid for now.
Great.
That's great. Right, on the internal service funds, reduction in the equipment replacement fund, as you'll see, that's due to the equipment purchases. We talked about that a little bit. He buys them at the beginning of the year, and then all the departments pay during the rest of the year for it.
And on that note, at the next council meeting, Kyle has told us that there will be a lot of those equipment purchases coming on the next agenda, and he works with the departments to try to get all those orders placed, so he will have a significant number of the planned equipment purchases ready, I believe, on the next agenda. So you'll see that decrease even more, but that's budgeted and planned.
Good, yeah. And the risk and workers' comp is the same thing, that all the departments pay into that all year round, their fair share for their employees. But our TML insurance policy is due in October, so we basically have to pay that up front and then accumulate the funds for the rest of the year.
And on that insurance fund, on the health insurance fund, we are not having a great year this year. Last year we had a pretty good year. We're able to hold our rates, but this year we have had some significant claims, and so I don't expect that to be nearly as good for us this year as it was last year, but we just had some pretty catastrophic health issues already occurring this year.
Our capital funds, this is increased in capital projects. The significant increase you see is due to the funding of the 2016 capital projects already this year, as well as last month's bond sale of $16.5 million for the Midtown project. Some of the major expenses you'll see that we've been encountering so far this year includes the street CIP expenses. That does include the $3.4 million in the final payment for the Glade Parks last fall. $110,000 for miscellaneous street repairs, including Midway at Fuller Weiser and ADA ramps around town. The Midtown CIP does include its debt issuance costs. That's all of the expense that you'll see there, but it is significant. That was from the CO sales. The water and wastewater CIP, that includes the reclaimed water line extension expenses, as well as a 24-inch valve replacement at Cinnamon and Amy's.
So the police facility wasn't funded and hadn't had any expenses?
That was the old CIP fund, back literally from when the police building was built. And there was a very small amount of money that was left over, but that money was designated for the police building, and they ended up using that for some additional keypads for the security and so forth.
Yeah.
So that is a project that it can be closed out now, but there was just a very small amount that is been there for years and years, but it was always reserved for the police facility, and then they ultimately used it to finish out upgrades on their security systems.
Yeah, the access panel.
Yeah, we were trying to wash it out last year, but unfortunately there was $435 that's in there, and that's why it looks to be a dash,
Okay.
because it's less than 1,000, but it's $430 some, and we've asked them, please spend that this year, let's get that.
Okay, so that's why it's
That's why
notated.
it's still there.
Okay,
It will
thank
go
you.
away, but it's not technically zero yet.
Okay.
All right, the general fund revenues. Year to date, the general fund has collected $16.2 million, or 43% of the budget. This is $139,000 more than last year at the same time, and that's mainly due to sales taxes. Because I mentioned earlier, TAD, we've got a kind of a delay in all the collections of all the property taxes. As of the end of January that you're seeing here, we had only collected 65% of our expected revenues for the year. But as of Wednesday, I recalculated and we're up to 95%. So we're about where we're supposed to be.
And that's directly related to their software conversion that caused some delay in getting out some bills and so forth. We think they're about to get their arms around that, but that was a significant project for them, but did impact our collection somewhat, but I think it's just a month-to-month timing issue, and it'll be fine by the end of our year.
General fund expenses, you can see we've spent $11.7 million, or 29% of your appropriated budget for this year. Carbon tax revenues, we're up 3% so far year to date. The water and wastewater revenues collected $7.2 million, or 32% of our expectations at this point for the year. The water wastewater expenses, they expense $6.9 million, or 31% of the appropriated budget.
Janina,
Yeah.
when you do your budget for water and wastewater revenues, are those, do you just take 12 months divided by 12, or do you use actual trend history per month?
We use trend history. Yeah, we really try and average those years, because obviously we've had some drought years,
Right.
we've had some flooding years thanks to last year. So we really try and merge those together for our best guess.
Right.
You never know what Mother Nature is going to do, but we certainly put historical trends in there and average those out on monthly usage. So. Texas Star Golf Course. Golf rounds are less than 1% below budget right now. Thank you, Mr. Stenford, for helping us out there. We did not lose any days of play in January, so that was a real blessing for us. Net loss this year is $21,000, which is actually $28,000 better than we expect for this time of year. Again, it's not just a divide by 12.
Right.
We factor in what the winter usage is and that kind of stuff, so we're actually doing better than we expected for right now. Texas Stars, did I not click through that one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you were there. You hit it twice.
We get it. Go, you ready? Go.
Okay. Texas Star Sports Complex. Net loss so far this year is $14,000. However, that is $6,000 better than we had planned on for this time of the year. As I've told you in the past, October and November were still quite wet, had a lot of issues there, but December and January really helped to turn us around for this year. So unless there's any other questions on January, we'll go on to kind of a little bit of a review of last year to kind of get you a base for this year's budget process, unless there's any questions. Let's go through that, and that looks really small up there, sorry about that. This sheet's pretty important, that it compares our fund balances for 2015 to the original budget, as well as the projected balances that we had discussed through the whole 2016 budget process. Those first three columns, that's going to compare the ending fund balance to the budgeted numbers, and the last three columns are comparing the ending fund balance to our projections, how we thought we were going to end 2015. And that to us is the most important column, that very last column, kind of in that little darker blue color there. These are the funds that have historically been available the following year to pay for the one-time requests. The city does adopt a balanced budget, which means that the operating budget will use current revenues to pay for the current expenditures. When we have expenditure savings or revenues in excess of our projections, those flow into our fund balances, and those are used to cash flow some of those one-time projects. And you'll be presented with those on June 9th. The departments will come through and they'll do their capital supplemental requests. And this is kind of that little bit of excess money that you might have available to consider for those projects. So let's go over some of those significant ones. That the general fund ended the year strong, $2.1 million more than projected. And most of that was due to sales tax collections, but also the licenses and permits were still up, and gross receipt tax. In addition to that, departments had expenditure savings, quite a bit in general fund for us. So that helped there. EDC has $520,000 available, and CCPD has $451,000 available due to their strong sales tax collections as well as expenditure savings. The Water and Wastewater Fund has $243,000 available, drainage $138,000, recreational class fund has $83,000, and insurance has $776,000. The public safety grant fund shows a decline, but this is simply a timing issue, and you'll see in this year's, it's already, that part's been adjusted out, but we have other reimbursements that we're waiting on as well. Overall, this indicates that we will have some excess reserves to consider for those capital and supplemental projects, but most of it will need to come from the general fund, EDC, and CCPD.
And I want to stop there just a minute and talk about, just in general, how the city has budgeted for as long as I've been here, and I think it predates me by many years. When we bring you the budget, we do the projections, and that's the column that says estimated fund balance. And then, based on those projections, we say this is how much that you have available that we believe is in excess of our required reserves, and then we try to cash flow as much of our requests as possible. The city, some cities would choose to put a lot of that in their baseline, and we have never done that. So there is no money in our baseline for the basic capital needs that we bring to all. We've tried to historically just cash flow those. You could make an argument, okay, yes, you should capitalize all those, you should have a depreciation cost associated with all those, or you should have something in your annual budget for those. The reason why we have not done that is if you put that as a part of your budget and you're absolutely doing it that way, then you will impact your tax rate. You could potentially have to raise your tax rate in order to do that. What we've done is we have taken a conservative approach to our revenue estimates. So we try to budget the revenue as what we expect we're going to get, but we are conservative. So sometimes we may collect more than what we have budgeted because we do try to be conservative. We, on our expenditure side, budget for what we believe those departments need. You all have asked us in the past, though, do we have a system where everybody runs out on September the 30th and spends everything that's left? And we say no, because we tell our departments, budget for what you need, but if you can achieve savings and you have savings, that money rolls over to the next year, and that is the pot of money that will be available to help fund any of your one-time requests. So we have never historically seen, a whole lot of people running out and buying stuff in September. Everyone recognizes. So we do not go in June and reduce their budgets or take away their money. We have an expectation, and they always have, use only what you need, return the rest to the fund balance, and anything that's left over you'll see coming out here. And then that list of requests, I want to make sure we're very clear. That is not your Christmas wish list of things that would be nice to have. There's a lot of those things that they really, really need. You'll see on there their thermal imagers for the fire department, or their life packs and AEDs, and it's equipment that they really truly need. But rather than going in and giving the fire department a $150,000 equipment budget, that obviously that'd be a half cent on the tax rate. We have tried to budget conservatively and have money left over at the end of the year in excess of reserves where we can cash flow that. And that has worked well for us for about 20 years. Do other cities do it differently? And is their way wrong and our way right? No, it's just our, it is a way that has worked for us and has allowed us to keep the baseline budget as low as we possibly can. And the other thing is if you were to put that $150,000 in the fire department, one year they might need that much, but the next year it might be the parks department. And then, do you end up with a situation where you're either constantly moving that? The way we do it, each department's coming in and telling you precisely what they need each year. And now what is not included in that is we do depreciate our vehicles, our equipment, those types of items like that. But as we've told you before, and you see the list from them each year of things that they need, that is not accounted for in their budget in any way. So when you hear those requests on June 9th, and then we rate them and we bring them back to you in August, that is their only opportunity to get those types of things. And it is that last column that we're using. And so other cities have taken an approach of going out and issuing short-term debt. So they might not go out and issue 20-year bonds if they don't have the money in their baseline budget for it. They might go out and issue short-term debt, 3-year or 7-year debt. And we have never issued debt for those types of purchases. Again, we have cash flowed those, and we limit that. And but so what you'll typically see when you see our estimates, you will see us trying to be very precise on revenue. We're trying to get our revenue as close as possible to give you the opportunity to allocate that to the one-time projects. On the expenditure side, we do not go in and try and take away those budgeted allocations to those directors. We expect them to return that at the year end, and then that's the money that's available the following year. Any questions or concerns about the methodology we're using there?
I think I completely understand, but let me check myself. The estimated fund balance was used as the beginning balance in the 16 budget.
That is correct. So if we missed that number, positive or negatively, it's going to impact your 17 budget that we bring to you. And what we're telling you is that is the money that will be considered excess. And so you can see down there that we're, you know, like in the car rental, we really didn't, we're $14,000 short on the, you know, I think that's a $13 million budget, so that's pretty darn close. Up there in the general fund, though, if the $2.1 million, that's a very nice surplus. Again, that's the two combinations. One is trying to budget conservatively on our revenues so we don't all of a sudden come up short. And secondly, the director's returning anything. You can get that from a position that's left over. That can simply be someone has left us during the year. It took them 3 months to fill the position, so you have salary savings. It can be a number of things that contribute to that. And so that has just really worked well for the city for many years. And we don't recommend changing it, but we do want to make sure everybody understands why we do it the way we do it.
Well, I think doing it the way we do it is the reason, one of the reasons we were able to keep our tax rate from up, down, such as some of the other surrounding cities have done, and has also kept us being, if not the lowest, one of the lowest debt per capita in the area. And I think it's doing it this way where you keep your income and your expenses as level as you can in your general fund, and then use that extra money for the, you know, they need the extra copier or the thermal imaging camera or whatever it might be.
Yeah. I think when you'll see the list, sometimes I'm concerned that people think that that's just just a shopping list, or we're just going out to spend all we have. And I think you all will see is that if we do not believe that it's absolutely necessary, it doesn't matter if there's $2 million, we won't recommend. I mean, we don't feel a need to go spend $2 million. I mean, we will recommend what is needed on that list, and then if there is money in excess of that, that can be used towards capital projects, or can continue to give us an extra reserve, an extra fund balance.
That final list is the original list, critically reviewed by the city management office.
The way that process works is each department has to submit that form that you'll see in that book on June 9th to say what it is they need and why they need it, what the alternatives are. Are there operational costs associated with it, or is it simply a one-time purchase item? They have to then rank that by their department, and they have to say, of the 10 items I submitted, these are the most important to us. And then we meet with every department. We go through all of their individual line items. We go through all of their requests. We discuss those with them. Then we go through, look at it as a group, we do our own prioritization of that. Obviously, then we look at the resources available. And if we see a conflict with the amount of needs versus resources available, then we go back and visit with the director some more about alternatives, or just how critical is this to you? Will the thermal imager that you've got, can it make it another year? What is the impact to service if we don't fund this? And then what you see in August, obviously you'll hear those presentations. You'll hear them on June the 9th. we do not rank until they talk to you all, because we want them to come and visit with you all before we have weighed in on it. Then we will talk to them about it. We do our ranking after they've talked to you. And we hear any of your feedback of things that are important to you. And then we do our ranking, we bring that to you in August, and you see, we are recommending this, this, or this. And, you know, of that number, you know, like you all have seen for a number of years, 300,000 of that for a number of years has been street overlay. So that is how Craner's saying, for us to continue the $900,000 annual commitment, that we need to keep our streets at the PCI index that we need, there's 300,000 there. So that 300,000, you could make an argument, you should put that in your baseline budget, that's the equivalent of 1 cent on your tax rate, or we can take that excess money and every year try to make that commitment. Obviously, we need to do that street overlay, but that's one of the items that you'll typically see in that is a very large item. So, we do have some of that in the baseline, and so there's a combination there. So if there were no money, it wouldn't be, it's not an all or nothing, but we would not have enough money. Obviously, in downturns, one of the first things cities cut is capital, and they would cut it out of their baseline. We have some portion of the street overlay in our baseline, we have some portion in the one time. But the amount that the consultant recommended that we need to be doing annually to stay at our current levels was about that 900,000, and we currently achieve that. Obviously, if we hit on hard times, we might have to reduce that down. It might only be 600. You can't do that too long, or you begin to create a deficit for the future. But could you do it for 1 or 2 years during a downturn? You could. So. Okay.
Okay, let's go into some of the major revenue sources. Of course, property tax, one of the major ones. Property values increased 3.4% from the previous year. We hope to see this trend continue as the development and redevelopment across the city in various areas continues to happen. We would expect to see the new value from Glade Parks, as well as the new residential areas on our May 15th numbers of this year, because it's taken as of January. So we hope to see those come through. Likewise, you'll see revenues are expected to increase 3.4% for this year for property taxes. Currently, we are in line with budget, like I said, after the January end numbers being so low. February pulled that back together for us. Sales tax can be volatile with our 2016 budget. At 2.7% increase over what we received last year, we're actually running 13% over last year. So that's really nice at this point. Next year, we do expect to see some reductions, of course, for the 183 expansion. However, we should also see some increases from Glade Parks come through for whole years.
And one of the points I made on that is that's always one that's can be a little deceptive. We know Glade Parks is going to bring us new revenue, which is great, but we know we're going to lose, and Chris is going to cover this, but our Whataburgers, our McDonald's will have at least some closure for some period of time. We've already lost our Wendy's, we've lost our Long John Silver's. And just in, not to talk about any specific restaurant sales tax, but in general, a fast food restaurant can account for, let's just say, $50,000 a year in revenue. Well, if you lose 5 of those or so, you could very easily be losing,
on your property tax.
you could very easily be losing $250,000 from that closure along that corridor. And as you said, that is 1 cent on the tax rate. Not that, I'm not suggesting at all we're proposing a tax rate increase. I'm saying that is $250,000 that will need to be offset by the Glade Parks revenue. And so I've cautioned our staff to say, while things look really good because you're seeing all the new development, you have to realize it takes several boot barns and it takes several of the little businesses that you see going in up there just to offset the loss before you get to a net gain. So it's a positive story, and I'm not trying to downplay that. I just think there is a huge impact to the closure of those fast food restaurants.
Yeah.
The positive is that you've got those coming on. If you didn't have that development,
Right.
then you're having.
Yeah.
I mean, if
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
have that growth coming on at Glade Parks, you are looking at finding expense reductions equal to $250,000 or raising revenues from some other source, and obviously we know that's not our first choice.
All right. Car rental revenue. We estimated car rental to remain flat for 2016, and we're actually up year-to-date 3%, so that's good. We do not expect any significant changes for 2017, though, in this area. Franchise fees, those taxes are there we go. I didn't realize the roller worked on that. That worked, okay. Franchise fees, taxes are collected from public utilities, and that includes electric, gas, telephone, sanitation, recycling, cable, water, all those different areas. We saw a slight uptick in the revenue for the last 2 years because of the really cold winters. We saw the gas revenues increase, but this year right now we're doing okay. But we had a pretty mild winter, which was a blessing out here. But the franchise fees may come in a little low. We'll have to see about that. But we don't forecast any significant changes for 2017 for those areas. Licenses and permits continue to be strong. We know this revenue will decrease as our build out, as we get closer to build out. So although we expect the construction activity to remain strong in 2017, we're striving to reduce our dependency on this revenue source. And it's critical that we exchange that with part of the sales tax that I was just talking about, that while those are coming on and building a sales tax, we're also going to lose their building permit fees and all that kind of stuff. So we've got to balance that out at some point.
This is the one that I've probably been most concerned about, that we have to continue to wean off of this. We know we're reaching build out. When you're in a growth phase of your city, you've got that building permit revenue coming in. We know for 2017 that's going to continue to be strong. We have a lot of development still occurring. But we know we're reaching build out. So as that sales tax comes on from those businesses that are building, we have to be decreasing our dependence on license and permits, because those building permits are going to drop. So that number has been there was a time that we only counted on, maybe 100, 200,000. In our growth years, we started counting on up to $500,000 of revenue from building permits. We have got to back that off and exchange that basically for the sales tax that we're getting, because when we get out to 18, 19, 20, and we are developed out, that building permit revenue, I'll use the term dry up. Obviously, there's the potential for some
So
redevelopment.
you'd be dropping $1 million from our high point, easily.
Yes. You could see a drastic drop. Well, we can't just, $500,000, if it drops off to, $100,000, again, that would be 2 cents on your tax rate, or would be the elimination of positions or whatever it might take to get to that point. So what we're saying there is we've got to be very, very careful that we do not become overly dependent on that building permit revenue, and that as we're reaching this build out, that we continue to lower our dependence on that.
I was gonna say, a great thing there that y'all did is, we have not added staff for that ramp up. Your staff that you have has worked hard. Y'all set aside some money for us to be able to use kind of, temporary assistance, which we've done a little bit contract. So that's the really good part, is you're not sitting there going, okay, now we're going down, we get to get rid of folks.
Well, yeah, if you had added 5 staff people for the uptick, and then the building permits went down, you could probably justify that, okay, we're gonna eliminate those 5 staff people because we're no longer needing all that building permit review and so forth. We didn't add any staff. That staff absorbed all of that workload, and they used a little bit of contract labor. We said it made no sense to hire people, try to outsource a little bit, try to do with what you have. So there is not the opportunity for us to go in and, from Mike Collins' area, cut 5 people. He barely has 5 people. So, we can't do that. So once that revenue goes down, there's no opportunity to go in there and recoup that from an expenditure savings. But the outsourcing you paid from your excess fund balance, your one-time money. So there really isn't that opportunity in your baseline budget. Mr. Tompkins, you have a
Well, that's what I was
question.
gonna ask, is does this license and permit, does this revenue just get rolled in, or was it designated for a specific purpose? But that's a great point there, that we have our baseline, we've used contractors when we spiked, and then we'll just fall back to normal.
It has just been in our general fund budget. It has been acting as an ongoing revenue source for us there. That's why we believe it's critical to exchange it as those buildings open. You're substituting that building permit revenue for some of that sales tax revenue, so that you're not all of a sudden, when you're $500,000 deficit, saying, oh my gosh, what do we do?
And just like you were pointing out, that works well with what she had mentioned earlier in the conservative budgeting for this. If we say we're only gonna bring in this much when when building permits are being so high and everything, even though we get a little more revenues, that carries over into that extra one-time money, And that's why we were able to pay for the consultants to come in and help. Because of our conservativeness on that side, we were able to do that during this interim period.
Cool. Very nice.
Okay, water and wastewater revenues. The 2015 was lower than originally budgeted, but slightly better than our year-end projections. Year-to-date revenues are slightly better than budgeted. I think I told you last month it was 4.1% up, and that's still basically what it's running. As a reminder, TRA is projecting a large rate increase, as they told us last summer in their 5-year projection. This year's increase would be 10.6 cents on water and 26.6 cents on wastewater. And that was in their 5-year projection. They won't tell us their new projections until this June, and then they won't approve those until they propose it in July for August. So we won't know until later in the year what that's actually gonna be.
So that, I mean, that is just, we don't see any relief on that, but that is a direct pass-through cost to us. We purchased that water from them and obviously sell it to our customers. And those projections can change each year. They always give us a 5-year plan, and then they go in and update those. But right now, if you combine those two together, that's 36 cents. They're saying 10 cents on the water side, 26 cents on the wastewater side. So, and that's without looking at one dime of our operating cost increase.
Right.
Right.
So,
I think I've asked this before, and I'm not sure what the answer was, but they're basically a monopoly. Is there any oversight that verifies that they're being efficient? I don't know how else to say it, but right now, they can spend what they want, and they just pass it on.
well, that budget, they're really a co-op. Remember, they're a co-op. So they do, there are member cities, and in the water side, there's 5 member cities. In the wastewater side, it's 21, 23 member cities. And they go through a budget process as well.
But there's no oversight, is there, or is there?
Well, Hal sits on our board as a representative to both of those committees.
And Janina and Jackie go attend their budget meetings, and they lay out their budget as well, and they propose what they're doing. So if they're proposing 15% pay increases for everyone, all those city staffs are gonna go back and understand that.
Okay, but we understand that, but is there any way that when they, and I don't think they're doing that, but if they were to come out and say, yeah, we really think we're underpaid, and we're raising everybody 15%, is there any recourse that the city would have at that time to saying, wait a minute, we're part of this co-op, no, you can't do that?
Well, we have a vote. We certainly have a vote with the other communities that is part of the co-op.
So the 5 cities, but how many votes are there total? I mean, are there 20 votes and the 5 cities get 5? I don't know how the governing body is up there.
It's the cities, that's it. That is their operating board.
Okay.
And plus, a lot of their costs are passed on for the North Texas Regional Water District.
You're
That's-
making a great point,
that's
Mr.
pretty
Vine. I started to say that if you've gotta go a step beyond them then. They're getting their water, they're purchasing their raw water, and that is the bulk of their increased costs as well. The other piece of theirs is debt, and that would be for plant expansion that
Right.
you heard when you heard Fiona out here talking about plant, well, she says it's a little different. Plot
Yes.
expansion, but she has a lot of accent, but I love her accent. But yes, that is the other key component of theirs. And maybe, Janina, we can try at the work session to give them a little bit of information on the TRA. We certainly could arrange for that as well, so.
I nominate Tim.
Tim,
So
my
we'll,
guess is it's probably during a work week.
yes.
10 o'clock in the morning.
Where that fell.
Okay.
And before I leave this, we are expecting a rebate for 2015. They just ended their 2015 fiscal year in December, and so they're tallying up their numbers right now. But preliminary information tells us that we will be getting back a rebate, so that'll help you consider continuing the annual rebate to our customers.
Great stabilization fund. Thank you. That's huge.
And of course,
I wasn't
Tim
expecting
Reeves is
that.
there. You know, last year we had some discussion about whether or not
Yeah.
we'd be able to continue that, and in light of their information there, it looks like that if we get a rebate for them, then we obviously would have more capability to pass that
Good
through
news.
to our customers and rebate, so.
Okay, the golf course, excuse me, after reopening, revenues for 2015 were down due to the record rainfall, unfortunately. In October and November was still quite wet, but again, just like the other area we were talking about, improvement over the last couple of months. December and January have been very good. We don't anticipate any significant changes for 2017. And the same story holds true for Texas Star Sports Complex. It was a tough year last year, the record rainfall. Our revenues were under budget as well as under projected. But 2016, again, started off tough, but last 2 months have come through and been doing a lot better. We don't expect any significant revenue changes for 2017, but of course not having to pay any more debt on soft borrow is going to help us on the expense side for this one.
Yeah.
All right, and to move a little bit more on to the 2017 budget, Ms. Sketchum pointed out earlier that we kicked off our budget process up at the city on Wednesday of this week with the department heads. They have to submit their budgets to the city manager's office October 1st. October. April.
She's been a little behind this year. Mr. Easton, don't look for that book.
April 1st, and it won't be an April Fool's. That was the October 1st comment. That was April Fool's joke. Okay. And then they'll have a lot of meetings with the city manager's office through May, and then your first meeting to discuss the capital and supplemental book. That'll be June 9th. So be ready for that. And you'll hear the presentation from all the departments at that time of their requests. And based on our multi-year projections that we had in last year's budget, we want to briefly discuss some of those issues just so that you're reminded of those right now. If you don't mind, we'll take a minute and look at what we're looking at for 2017. On the revenue side, property tax values expect some increase due to the increased development at Glade Parks and various residential projects. Like I said, those will be coming out, real preliminary numbers, May 15th, that'll include more of that. And there have been some reductions we're expecting for 183 construction, but not really on this tax roll. That'll be mainly next year's tax roll that we'll see that on, because that'll be January 1st of 2017 that we'll be seeing those numbers. Local control over property tax revenues is always a concern. Obviously, this is not a legislative year, but we've already seen discussion around the state happening there, so we're always attuned to that conversation. Sales tax should remain strong with new developments, including Belk, DSW, Bath and Body Works, Tuesday Morning, and maybe some inline stores, but will be partially offset by the 183 construction again. As Ms. Sketchum pointed out earlier, we've already lost Wendy's, Long John Silver's, expect to lose Starbucks, Jack in the Box, Whataburger, McDonald's during the
I thought
relocation.
Starbucks was gonna alter their parking and stay. Are they not now?
Well, and some of those, she went through real quick, but some of them are temporary losses. Like McDonald's, for instance, is staying and they're rebuilding, but there will be a period of time that they're closed down. Starbucks is still, I mean, they're trying to do everything they can to stay, and it's hard to run a Starbucks without a drive-through.
Yeah.
We are not seeing an opportunity for them to have drive-through, and I don't know how they stay without that. So that could change, but right now, I think we'll lose them.
And as mentioned, while we expect building permits to remain strong for 2017, we need to continue to wean off that revenue source in offset to the sales tax increases. Car rental revenues, we expect that to remain relatively flat, as mentioned earlier. Hotel motel, this is expected to increase with the opening of the Hyatt place at Southgate Plaza. However, remember that's in the airport, so we share 2/3 with Dallas and Fort Worth, 1/3 each. And expenditure side of this, for expenditures, of course, we're going to need to consider a modest pay plan, as well as we're always concerned about health insurance costs. And Ms. Sketchum pointed out some issues this year that may add to that. We're very aware of. We're also aware of some of the staffing levels. That's going to be, we believe, a primary thing that our departments are going to ask for this upcoming year.
I want to stop and talk about that a little bit in detail. I think that is probably the biggest challenge we'll have for this year is staffing requests. We've talked to you about the cuts we made during the downturn, and we did not add back, and our people have done a great job of trying to hold on. We are starting to feel the bulges in some areas that just, I don't believe that we can continue to operate at this level and maintain our service levels without adding a little bit of staffing. We are very, very cognizant of trying to not impact the tax rate and trying to work within the parameters we have. But you know we have 2 police officers right now that are paid from the seized assets, and we have a commitment to roll those into our baseline budget. We did 1 this past year. We expect to do 1 in 2017 and 1 in 2018. So that is a commitment there that we need to follow through with, because those people are hired and working. With the additional expansions that we've had, particularly Glade Parks, and you talked about service levels, there is a demand for service there that we have to meet. On the fire side, there is very little doubt in my mind that they are going to be asking for at least 2 firemen. I have asked them to please come with a strategy whereby typically the fire department will only ask for things in 3s because that's what they need for shifts. I said, get creative. How in the world could you do something if you could only get 1? Or what could you do? We know we're going to have the issue of response times with the 183 work that's happening, and we're trying to figure out how to keep that squad in service more. That may be something we can try to consider with additional overtime, where it's not necessarily all in the baseline budget. So that's something we can look at. But they are needing additional staffing. That is not cheap. To add 3 firemen is not cheap. So,
Is there a way, and this probably Perry might answer this best, something, and this is completely different, but back in my old retail days, we had floating pharmacists. They were full-time, but they might work here, different. We had 12 Kmart's in a town, and they'd be working all over the place. Is there a possibility that you could hire 2 firemen, for example? Because right now, we run a lot of overtime, and I know guys depend on a certain amount of that overtime, and it's cheaper than hiring a full-time firefighter. But if we hired 1 or 2 floaters, there's always guys on vacation. There's always, with the amount of staff we have, could we not staff that, and then if there happens to be no need for them at that time, then they run the squad?
we have asked the possibility, some of that runs into the way the shift works, because you work 24
Yeah, you couldn't
on,
work,
48 off.
Yeah.
So obviously, that we've asked them to consider how that could work for them, but because you can't work somebody 24 hours and go, oh, so-and-so called it tomorrow.
Yeah.
Can you go ahead and work another 24 hours?
but you know what,
You know, that
the
is,
overtime guys do that.
So,
Yeah.
You know, they do that a lot, because they
Or,
do sleep.
so it would be something, we've asked them to look at that as an option. How can you make one guy, how can one guy help? How can two guys help? How does overtime help? So we're not taking anything off the table for that discussion. I'm just saying that it's not gonna be their preference, Mr. Bynum. I think that's safe to say, won't be their preference.
Well, you know, you and I both know, I mean, you know numbers better than I do, Loretta, but there is that magical curve that you get with constant staffing using overtime. There is a point where you can hire 3 guys and reduce your overtime with that cost savings, but in the same token, you can say, well, we can increase overtime to offset the staffing issue. You have the same issue. There's going to come a time where people are not going to work overtime, then you have minimum staffing issues. You know, those are those balancing acts you take, but it's hard to add just one person to the fire department.
Yeah.
I mean,
And you know, you say that
Same thing in PD.
there are certain guys that do rely on the overtime.
Yeah.
But they're getting fewer and fewer because so many of them have lucrative other
Yeah.
jobs. And you're gonna come to a point where they don't want overtime. And then you're at a crisis point.
But then we've also got so many of our long tenured people in the last couple of years have retired. And I'm assuming, in most cases, if a 35-year person retired, I know everybody bumps up. But I would think you have a net savings somewhere in there when you have a lot of 35 and 30-year people, or even 20-year people that go away. And I would think that that could work into those numbers. And again, when a fireman gets overtime, is that his regular pay another 8 hours, or is it time and a half? I don't know how that
well, it
works.
just depends on FMLA. There's a lot of, whether or not it's time and a half or whether or not it's straight time. I mean, they've got to work the minimum amount of hours.
Yeah.
So on and so forth. But, you know, the city of Arlington has tried that for years through the constant staffing, and then they went to the squads. And, you know, with the squads, it's helped tremendously. So and my thought, if you could get the squatting service, say, at least 90% of the time, that would help you tremendously, but I don't see it, just going back to where I work, we went to the same issue, and, we hired, complete shift. I mean, we added that much staffing.
But that's
So we hired
$500,000?
9. No, that's a
Oh.
lot
Oh,
more.
you're talking about
3
9
shift,
or 11
yeah.
people, or 9 people.
We added a whole another company
Wow.
too, because of the
Wow.
820 construction,
Yeah.
same thing that we're gonna have to
It
put
is
23.
enormously costly.
It's expensive.
So I'll lift that up. The chief has been charged with bringing us Plan A, B, C, and D. And so he is going to be bringing us a multitude of options on that. I lift it up as a need. The other areas that we have need is at the recreation center, the recreation center supervisor, and you all are aware that our programmer there, Robbie Rogers, had a stroke, is still out. Robbie is, at this point, still pretty much paralyzed on his left side. Had been able to regain just a very minimal motion in his hand. But we're hoping that is a sign of significant progress to come here. But, so they are operating and have been operating, obviously, without Robbie for a number of weeks. So they have moved Suzanne over, and she's trying to assume those duties in addition to all of her other duties at this point. But they were in need of that supervisor before we lost Robbie. They asked for the supervisor last year. That is one that is probably reaching a critical level. We also expect that PD may be asking for a dispatcher. Don't know that for sure, but we kind of think they may be. There's been some discussion about whether or not at some point we're going to need additional code officers. Access Euless has been a great thing, but people use it a lot, and you got to be able to respond, and you got to be able to respond timely to that. The other areas that we are expecting, I guess, to see Public Works field techs. Hal Craner has continued to say that they are struggling and need probably 2 more Public Works field techs. And then you've got your 2 secretarial jobs right now that are filled with part-timers, one in Kyle's area. And, Kyle manages all of our fleet facilities, and he has tremendous paperwork. So that is one that I expect Kyle will continue to ask for that to be full-time. And then Hal has a part-time secretary that I have very little doubt that he will ask for that conversion. Certainly, I don't know that there would be any way that we can fund everything I've mentioned to you. I just mentioned to you that I believe all of those are legitimate requests, they are legitimate needs, and we will have to try to balance the most critical of that with the resources available.
And we have to also look at, instead of doing creating a full-time position, is we hire 2 part-timers and we save on the benefits, which are a huge drain on us right now.
We have not been as successful as I might have thought we would be in trying to fill these part-time positions. That is absolutely our preferred method to do that, particularly with like the secretarial positions. And it has been our thought that, well, we would find somebody who wanted to work 9 to 3 while their children were at work, and that'd be a good situation.
Thank you.
Our response to that has not been as good. What we've typically been seeing here is I think people will apply and they say they're interested in the part-time job, but then the full-time job comes open and they leave us and they go take a full-time position.
Yeah.
So we have had some success with that. We have had some folks that truly do want to work a 9 to 3 or whatever it might be, and that's been good. But those are things we absolutely have to continue to consider, is just keep it, because there's no way we can do all that I've talked about. Don't want you to think that I'm saying we're going to come in here and ask for a 10-cent increase or something to fund all this position. That's not what we're saying at all. I just want to lift it up to you. I think we can just stop here and we'll pick back up after lunch. I don't want anybody's food to get cold, and we'll go through the other few things we have here and then transition over to our capital. Did I miss any other staffing positions?
Nope, that was all I have.
Okay.
Are you seeing retirees, and then it's taken 2 people to fill that one retiree spot? Like, do you look at Larry with the dog pound, or the dogs, or you look at the